What's up, everybody? We are back. I'm Lane. My boy Zane is here. We're here for not our first, not our second, but our third episode of
Yeah,
Spitting and Chatting. Zane, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, man. What's up with you?
I'm good, man. Ready to get this show going. Kick off on another good subject we can talk about. What
Okay.
what you got there in front of you right there?
You talking about this?
Yeah, that and that shirt, man. That shirt look
Oh
nice too.
yeah. Appreciate that. Spitting and
Man,
chat coming to you
man, it's a
live.
white one.
Boom.
Straight white
Yeah.
tee.
Yeah.
Nice. But since you pulled out the paperwork, man, let's get into our show, man. And if you can bring it up to everybody what we're going to talk about today and what you got on hand over there.
All right, well let's get into it. It's kind of jam packed. And we
Yep.
normally like to start off with some facts and a little research. If you saw the thumbnail, you already know what we getting into. And it's
Yep.
basically men got feelings too.
Mm.
So, but did you know that research indicates that approximately 40% of men avoid talking about their feelings to maintain an image of strength and avoid appearing unmanly?
Wow. Wow.
And then out of that 40%, 29% citing embarrassment and 20% citing a negative stigma. So it's very interesting that there's some deep reasons, psychology and all these studies behind, why us as men don't discuss our feelings, don't talk about our
Mm-hmm.
feelings. And just a couple more things before we really start getting into it. Another study shows that there's 27 different types of feelings, but there are six basic feelings that all humans experience from time to time. And so these major ones are happiness, anger, fear, sadness, disgust, and surprise. A
Wow.
few of those, I mean, we know about those, but a few of those I didn't really know were actual like main elements that the psychology or psychologist world, consider to be like the main feelings. So when I was preparing for this, I was thinking about like what are some of our highs and lows as men?
Mm.
So if I was to ask you kind of on the happy side, the
Mm-hmm.
victory side of life, what would you say, like what has brought you some of like the happiest moments in your life?
Man, definitely with my family, things surrounded around my family kind of really brought me to happiness. Like it
Hmm.
was like a victory, every one, whether that's a new addition or
Hmm.
anything family oriented. Really brought me to a sense of happiness. Also, when I think about my career, where I came from, and getting in the healthcare career and how I accomplished that, that brought me to a sense of happiness. And even more recently, as a healthcare worker, when I looked at COVID and
Hmm.
seeing where we were when we first
Hmm.
started, and then how the whole country jumped in and all the healthcare workers, went to work and did their job, and seeing the work we put in and where our country is at now,
Yeah.
that brings me a lot of happiness.
Yeah, man. And that's what people need to hear, that's what other men need to hear.
Hmm.
We go through a lot of struggles, and of course, we're gonna talk about that. But
Right,
we
right.
also
Yeah.
got some things, where it's victories in our life that we need to share. We need to
Yeah.
kind of make
Yeah.
sure others know about. For me as well, and I think most men, when you accomplish something, it's like, those are things that bring you happiness.
Hmm.
And like you mentioned, like having an addition to the family. My daughter was like a huge,
Hmm.
blessing for us, and
Right, right.
getting married.
Yeah.
It's a huge, huge accomplishment, and being married 25 years. So,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. Getting my master's degree, being
Mm.
being one of the first to do that in my family, is a huge accomplishment. So those are some of the happiest times. I do want to kind of throw out there like high
Hmm.
school, a lot of things that we did in high school as friends and just
Yeah,
hanging out
yeah.
as boys. Like, those are just invaluable times. You know what I'm saying? You
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
really recreate that, or you
Mm-mm.
can't get that back. You know what I
Nah,
mean? But those
nah.
are like some of the happiest moments I could think of, throughout my
Priceless,
time.
yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you
So,
this. Why do you think we as men suppress our feelings? Why do we hold our feelings in?
man, that's something I'm still trying to figure out, to be honest with
Right.
you. I mean, just full transparency. You probably hear me
Mm-hmm.
say this every episode, but I just started seeing a counselor recently,
Mm-hmm.
and I went in kind of just trying to do a maintenance check for like marital counseling. It's always good to
Right.
get some maintenance. If
Yeah.
you need some communication help, stuff like
Straight
that.
oil change. Yeah.
Straight oil change. So, I'm getting a little tune up, and I'm
Right.
about to start this process, and the counselor's like, "Hold up, like let's start with your childhood."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I got derailed. You know what I mean? I'm thinking I'm going in for one thing, and we started talking about my childhood, man, and things really start to come out that I really just didn't understand that was bothering me, and it's
Right.
actually turning into like a grief counseling. As I lost my mom when I was
Mm.
11, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
more, but there's so much stuff like I can't even explain like all the directions my life went after her death. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? And how it's impacted relationships, my marriage, just my view on life. I guess to roundabout way to get back to your question, I mean it's really hard, because we have so much baggage that we probably don't even know. We always think
Right.
the
Yeah.
women are the only ones that have baggage. No, that's a myth. You know what I mean?
Nah.
We all
Nah.
got our own junk, our own garbage that we got to deal with. And I think it's because we just don't know how to like express it. We don't know how to articulate it. As guys,
Yeah.
we're like, what up? You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like I don't think we have enough like deep conversations,
Yeah.
to really get
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. And like you said, we have baggage too. And a lot of us suppress that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like you said in those statistics earlier, it's like all that stuff that we deal with, and we have a tendency to just kind of store it in and keep it there and try to put this image of a tough guy.
Yeah.
And the tough guy is not really the one who suppresses stuff. I mean, the more you suppress stuff, the more you're like a volcano waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And you don't
Yeah.
know how bad that can be, but you could snap and, it could be over nothing. And
Yep.
it really wasn't even about why you snapped. It was just, you were just holding a whole lot of feelings in. And
Yeah.
you didn't have maybe the platform or the relationship with somebody to really express yourself. But yeah, it's good. You go get your tune up, man, and get your oil changed and your weekly fix. That's something I do too. And
For
I
real.
get the same thing. A lot of stuff goes back to my childhood.
Yeah.
But we had a good upbringing. We didn't miss no meals. We always had a roof over our head. But that doesn't mean there weren't other things bothered us or that may have scarred us a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. To that point, like back to the highs, we talk about what
Hmm.
things kind of make us happy and, the joys that we can get out of life, with
Hmm.
family or just, doing things that we enjoy. There's also the lows that bring out anger,
Mm.
or like I said, distrust or fear. And I wrote down a few of those things. And for me, like I've experienced a lot of death. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? A lot of death in my family. First starting with my mom, cousins to, all type of family members. I've seen a lot of death. Job loss, as
Hmm.
a man, how does that impact us? That's probably a
Right.
whole nother episode we need to talk about. Religion. I know we're gonna get into
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
a
That's
week
a
or
big
two
one.
from now too, but
That's a big one.
religion, has brought on a lot of distrust, a lot of disgust and anger because of things I'm finding out after the fact, that I'm still dealing with. And then just, there's anybody that's been married, for more than a year, you experience something. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
You're gonna experience
Definitely.
some challenges, and
Yeah.
that's just the reality of it. So those type of things can bring on different emotions, different
Hmm.
feelings, and those can bring on some lows that we don't really always know how to talk.
Yeah, yeah. And you said it too, man, because a lot of us, we just tuck it in, we hold it in, and we
Hmm.
laugh it off. And you see it in the way we live, the way we present ourselves. A lot of us overcompensate
Yeah.
and trying to be this tough guy, trying to put this image of I'm the man and I got it all in control and I'm cool breeze. But man, really, that person's probably hurting the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he just wants some conversation. Maybe he just wants to sit down and tell somebody, hey, man, I got issues. Here's what's going on in my life. But a lot of us have a tendency to overcompensate with things,
Yeah.
putting that tough
Yeah.
guy image out there and that's not really who you are, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right. And most of us, if we be honest, we really not about
Mhm.
that life.
No.
But there's like you said that I guess that manly persona, that we feel
Right.
like we have to keep up can lead us into a lot of different directions,
Hmm.
and whether that means, gangs for some people,
Yeah.
whether that means you may just dive into work and just overconsume yourself with
Yeah.
work, or you may dive into the wrong things, whether
Yep.
that's clubbing, women, whatever it may be. We can be extreme in anything.
Yep.
Religion, it's all kind of things you can throw yourself into because you're missing something. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And you try to overcompensate, like you said.
What do you think is like when we think of our relationships with wives, rather you got a wife or a girlfriend, what is it something you think that they don't know about us and our feelings? Like some of them I know they have the tendency to think, oh, we don't have feelings. No, we do, but why do you think they think that?
I think part of it is society. Just like we've bought into the narrative, like, we ain't supposed to cry, or,
Hmm.
we got to keep, like you said, the tough image up at all times, no matter what's going on. I think in a sense, they've kind of bought into that, right? And at the
Yeah.
same time,
Mm.
we've kind of aided in that because of just our
Yeah.
own issues. We've all kind of bought into this myth, and then we try to uphold it when we're with them. So when they do see us cracking or breaking down, it's like they probably don't even really know how to deal with that because
No.
we tried to uphold this fake, you know what I'm saying, like
Yeah.
persona for so
You're right.
long.
Right. Right.
That's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Speaking, it was like when you think of how, our relationships and, expressing our feelings, a lot of times, guys, we don't want to tell the woman, hey, how we're really feeling. And really, be honest with you, we're afraid of being shut down. We're afraid of just getting pushed back and saying, oh, no, you're not manly enough or you're not
Yeah.
tough enough. And,
Yep.
which is totally disrespectful. And that's a
Right.
word that we pull from our feelings too, is that we equate respect to love.
Yeah.
And you can't love us if you don't respect us. Do we need you to bow down to us every time we hit the door? No. But hey,
Right.
maybe just put an ear to me and just listen to what I got to say.
Right. Right.
Seeing how I'm feeling, seeing how my day was or what I'm going through.
Right.
And
Right.
even if I'm at my low moment, hey, learn how to pull me up out that moment without disrespect or without any kind of, rejection.
Right. Man, I guarantee you, if you asked 100 men, like, what is one of the biggest probably triggers,
Hmm.
it will probably, I'm sure 99.9 would say respect.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Big time.
the disrespect or the lack of respect would be a trigger for any man, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And I've always kind of asked myself, why is that such a big thing? Why is that such a big deal? And to me, I'm just learning myself that, the way that we're created, we're like protectors, you know what I mean?
Right.
We're already made to kind of guard our families and protect them. And so,
Absolutely.
from a husband that is here for his wife and for his family, when it comes so close, you know what I mean? And so
Mm.
from inside your home, that's just a different level, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are some men that result to domestic violence, you know what I
Mm.
mean? And we know that that's not the answer. That's not the response that we should have. But so many men are pushed. Those buttons are
Yeah.
pushed because of the lack of understanding, I think, of
Yeah.
what you're saying, and that's a scary point. You know what I mean? Because us grown, we're older now. We understand like boundaries,
Yeah.
right? And we know when to walk away, but a lot of younger people, younger generation are having a hard time with this.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter what generation, but I'm just saying, like, it's
Yeah.
getting worse, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the respect levels are just kind of dwindling.
Yeah. The respect is definitely, especially dealing with our community and our people as a whole, the respect we have for one another, with us, with other men, or, we're out and about, and the immediate disrespect, we interpret that as, oh, I got to go at him or I can't let him get one up over me. And a
Mhm.
lot of that is just your pride. Like this person may not know you from jump,
Yep.
but you felt disrespected by him or her, and man, you're going to go at them just because of your pride. When
Right.
why do you really care? But somebody who doesn't know you, didn't
Hmm.
grow up with you, not your friend, not your family, doesn't love you, why do
Yeah.
we care what they think? You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you think that, it makes you really second guess your reaction to things because you see a lot of hyper emotional guys. I see a lot of them where,
Hmm.
some guy will test you, with a yo mama joke or with a your
Hmm.
daddy or your child joke. And,
Hmm.
he's ready to fight. Grown men in our 40s still,
Yeah.
can't handle that.
Right.
And man, some of those guys are scarred at some point in their life and they just didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to, it's not saying they got bullied all the time. No, but they don't know how to resolve conflict in a
Right.
respectful manner. But they can't, all they goes from 0 to 100, really doesn't
Hmm.
know how to resolve conflict.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I remember one of my fights in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting into altercation with another, young man, and
Mm-hmm.
I
I remember
used
that.
the yo mama thing, and
Right.
and here's the thing, I knew that was a button,
Right.
right? That's a button for anybody. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that triggered a fight, and it was what it was, but it's not something I'm proud of. Looking back, those are kind of signs of, like, really immaturity. You know what I mean? So still there. Testing 1 2. Did we lose you, Lane? You look frozen. Text my boy, but should be back any moment now.
Can you hear me?
This has been brought to you by Spitting and Chatting.
Straight
Just waiting
internet.
on my boy to come on back. Technology. Be watching this. This is what editing's for.
You there?
Yeah, man, I'm here.
I don't know what happened. The
That's what
internet
edit
just, yeah, but I
without
can edit it and just link them up. Oh, we're still rolling.
Okay.
Yeah, I can,
Okay.
I can
So you
edit
can
that.
cut that out.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. All right. Looks like your camera's still trying to focus,
Can you see me now?
but it was blurry a little bit, but it's coming back. I think it focuses or something. Yeah, like there you go.
I have to get me another little extender for the Wi-Fi. I didn't have
Okay.
this problem before though. Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right. So where were
So we
we?
had wrapped up on the you know, that was immature, you know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
The triggering another man,
Mm-hmm.
At that time we were boys, we were kids, that happens in
Yeah,
high school.
yeah.
Fights happens and silly stuff happens, and it's something we should all learn from,
Right,
especially as we get, become adults.
right, right,
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen though. Unfortunately,
right.
some people still carry those habits well into their older ages.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What is because I hear this now more than anything. What do you think an alpha male is? Considering what we're talking about with men's feelings and stuff, what is your
Yeah, yeah.
definition of an alpha male?
I mean, we hear that all the time,
Right,
and some people brag on being an alpha male.
right.
From my understanding of it is they just think they're the male of all males. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like they're the dominant one, and I mean, that's just to answer your question point
Right.
blank. They think they're the most dominant, male there is.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that at any male, all of us, we got weaknesses.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep.
But yeah, to answer your question, that's what I believe that term leads
Yeah, I
to.
hear this topic a lot on the internet, and I hear, a lot of people talking about it. But like you said, the guy who's, shows dominance, and
Yeah.
but like you said, a lot of those guys are hurting,
Yeah.
because a lot of us, regardless of how alpha male we think we are, a lot of us show our natural insecurities,
Yeah.
and we all have them. And I'll give you an example. I hear this a lot when I hear online about women talking and guys not comfortable maybe with what they're wearing.
Mm.
We're talking, hey, you're going out to a club, a lounge, maybe to a concert, and you both are looking, real nice and shiny and flashy, and your girl's looking good
Right.
and you sharp, and
Right.
but they talk about that guy because other guys are looking at her.
Mm.
And off the bat, our insecurities take off. Oh, no, you can't wear that. Or don't look at my girl. It's like, man, what are
Yeah.
you out here for then? People are going to look, but she's with you. Why
Right.
are you so insecure about that? What is going on? What happened to you before to where you don't want to let this person be their self? So now you're
Mm.
hindering her, And
Yeah.
there's obviously
Yeah.
like times and places where you can dress like that. You don't take her to meet moms and she's got all that on. It's a time and a place.
Right.
But what happened to you to make you so insecure like that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and we know that insecurity brings on basically the feeling of fear,
Yeah. Yep.
and here's the thing, no man is gonna like admit like I'm afraid, I'm
Yeah.
fearful of losing you to somebody
Mm.
else, or I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Pretty
I mean,
much.
other than that, why would you be worried, you know what I mean, or be insecure
Yeah.
if this is your woman, right?
Yeah.
And you're taking care of your woman, why would you be insecure? Well, it's there's some type of fear, has
Yeah.
another boy or man at some point took your woman, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have you been cheated on? And that's a valid thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a valid thing because, women cheat
Yeah.
just like men do. So,
Absolutely. Man, men never get over that. Like a woman in a
mm,
relationship that you can hear, they can bounce back. But us,
mhm,
man, that's hard to recover from. And most guys I say, I hear that have dealt with that, they say, yeah, man, I rolled out. I can't tolerate that, and
yeah,
like you
yeah,
said, men and women both do it, but the person, that insecure guy who doesn't want nobody looking at their girl, or, even though she's dressed real nice and she's a professional doing her thing, and hey,
yeah,
she's with you, she's looking good for you. Them other
right,
guys are going to look, we all look, men are men, but she's doing that for you. But your insecurities are so hyper, you can't even see past that.
right,
But
right.
like maybe something happened in your prior, relationships, or when you were younger, where man, maybe you lost that girl, or
Hmm.
however. But to me, if that happened, she was never yours to begin with,
There it
But
is. There it is.
learning how to deal with loss and to deal with,
Mm,
you're not going to get all of them. Not all of them are going to
right,
say hi to you. How do you deal with rejection? Does that
right,
help you as a man?
right,
Learn your
right.
approach. You're not going to get them all. You're going to have to
Yeah,
take a L. If that guy thinks that, hey, I get all the, no, you don't. No, you don't. You took some losses in life. You just
right.
putting the front out there.
Exactly, exactly. And we all experience that rejection.
Yep.
Sometimes we're reaching for the stars,
Yeah.
and you just like you said, you just ain't gonna get it. And
Yeah. It,
that's
it ain't
that's the
going to happen.
reality.
It ain't going to
And
happen.
at the same time, you might have dodged a bullet too.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
For
Because
real.
as we're looking back and we're seeing things from a different perspective now that we're
Yeah.
getting older, you know that everything that's shiny, like you said, is not always,
Nah.
what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, man,
So
I know I
there's
done
all
dodged a lot of bullets.
right,
A lot of
right.
them.
And a lot of what people may think are the prize and all that stuff, well, it may come with a lot more problems than what you think, or it
Yeah,
may come
yeah,
with a lot more
yeah,
upkeep, so to
yeah.
speak, than what you thought. So,
I know as a father trying to teach my young boys about relationships and how to deal
yeah.
with relationships at this point in your life, and knowing sometimes you're going to lose one or two, a good,
Hmm.
one that you thought was a good one, or one you really invested into, one
Yeah,
you gave your heart to. It may not work out. Learn how to deal with that. And they're like, well, what
right.
do you mean? What do you mean? Well, embrace it. It's
Yeah.
something you're going to go through that's going to make you a better person. You're not going
Hmm.
through that for nothing, so that when you meet the right one, you're going
Hmm.
to approach them differently and really, keep them close to you and be open with them.
Hmm.
And, the ones that are going through your life at the young age, yeah, hey, they're going to come and go, but, are you going to get depressed and down? And I hear a lot of people, a lot of parents talking to their kids about relationships, and some of their kids get depressed when they lose a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And
Hmm.
and it can happen. It's going to happen. It's going to hurt. It's supposed to hurt. But
Yeah.
how do you move on from that? Did you learn from it? And knowing, hey,
Hmm.
you're going to take some losses in life, and that's just the
Right.
way it is. But how do you embrace it? How do you learn from it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me
And
ask you
just for
this. Is there
yeah, yeah.
something in your life that's like hurt you that you know that a lot of people don't know? Maybe whatever it is, but you still hold, you still hold that baggage pretty hard. Is there something in your life you haven't that hurt you real bad that's you're still learning to deal with to this day?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, to you, you know about this, and my wife, the closest people know, but I mean, it still comes down to my mom's death. Is really the most painful thing that I've ever experienced.
Right.
Just, I mean, imagine 11 years old, you coming home,
Yeah.
about your mom's home, sleep, you hear her snoring. I go and do my homework. I check on her in about an hour and she's blue. And from that point, I was thrown into a world that I just didn't know. Then I moved, to South Central LA to live with my grandparents and my father. And who I really didn't know at that time.
Right,
So
right.
it's like I never got a chance to really deal with that 11-year-old boy.
Mm,
So that's kind of why I'm in counseling now,
right.
because there's been things that just would pop up, various things, even in my marriage where I can just when we talk about feelings, it's like I'm a pretty like easygoing person, you
Right.
know what I
Right.
mean? Like I'm relaxed, I'm calm, I'm cool breeze for the most part.
Yeah.
But this particular issue, I can shut off like emotions, you know what I mean? And that's not good. I
Mm,
could just walk away from a situation and not feel nothing. And that comes from like that moment in time where I had to my life just changed and I
right.
never like grieved. You know what I'm saying? So I'm learning that now. I got to go back and deal with like all these different events that
Hmm.
kind of stemmed from that moment that I never even really dealt with. I just went from this innocent boy. Now I'm living in the hood and, got to deal with all that
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
and navigating those waters, then dove into religion and the cycle went on,
Yeah.
So that would probably be the most hurtful thing,
Mm,
that life curveball that I got.
man, that's understood, brother. Yeah. I don't.
What about you? If I was throw that curveball right back at you,
Woo.
what has hurt you, man?
Man, there were two things, two big events that happened in my life that were just like a gut punch. The first one is, and you know this, I had a kid right out of high school. And a lot of
Yep.
people know that, but I mean, from jump, I was a single parent. And so, man, that really somewhat changed my life. I had to change
Mm-hmm.
how I thought, change how I approach things because I have a son at home. And man, when I say I didn't
Yeah.
know nothing, I was like, sterilize a bottle. Obviously, he's not
Yeah.
getting breastfed. So I'm straight
Right.
Similac doing all that stuff, but it made me, like I was into football and stuff, and I had to kind of scale back from that. I was playing football at Santa Monica College. I
Mm-hmm.
also had some injuries and stuff too, but there was a little bit of, if I had to be honest, just because the way society looked at me from being a young
Mm-hmm.
dad, there was a little bit embarrassment, and
Mm.
it that's just how the society would look at you. They won't say it,
Right.
but they're thinking it.
Yeah.
What did this
Right.
man do, young man do to have a kid at this age when he's still a kid himself?
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes people will be vocal about it. And then sometimes
Right.
they would just show it through their actions and stuff. But
Right.
I was a single dad just from 18 years old. And in a sense, me and him had to grow up together. I'm still growing
Yeah.
up. I got this little boy who I'm trying to raise. And thank God for my mother and my grandmother because I had a lot of help.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
man.
then one of the things that I'm most proud of him is that
Mm-hmm.
his educational success, but he doesn't have any bitterness.
Mm.
He's not bitter towards his mom, towards anybody. To him, man, he had a great life, man.
Yeah.
He rose like a rock star, but he knows,
Man.
I mean, I'm his dad where his bread and butter came from, but
Yeah.
he doesn't have no bitterness towards his mom, towards anybody. And that, man, when I heard him talk about that, I like, man, that was like, man, he's
Yeah.
he's he's a good kid. Because that
Yeah.
things like that have a tendency to like hold people back emotionally.
Yeah.
And then my grandmother passing away, man. I mean, you remember my grandmother, and
Yeah.
she died on Mother's Day. So Mother's Day
Mm.
is never really the same for me, no matter how
Yeah.
many years have changed.
Yeah.
Mother's Day is just not the same for me. And I was depressed. I know my mom was depressed. My son was down because my grandmother was, in a sense, like his mom. My mom
Right.
and my grandmother were like his mother. So he had lost a mother and,
Mm.
I didn't know how to deal with it. And I see death a lot as a healthcare worker, but
Mm-hmm.
when you deal with it personally, man, it's a
Yeah.
gut punch. And so it took
Yeah.
me a while to get on my feet emotionally. I was very depressed. I had to take time off of work and eventually I got back on my feet, but it took some years. And I still have
Mm.
those days where I think about her, especially Mother's Day. And that's just how it is. But me communicating, talking to my therapist, getting my oil change and my tune up weekly helps
Yeah.
me learn how to process things like that. And then I was open too about me being a young father and how people look down on me and how that made me feel. I'm open about that stuff.
Hey, man, I gotta give you big props and
Mm,
kudos, man, for that. I remember that time,
yeah.
and I just gotta give you your props, bro, because you, as a man, to just be there for for your son.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it was amazing to see
yeah.
because I mean, I hadn't seen anything like that. You
Right,
know what I mean? You
right.
was so, we were so young, you were so young, and just shout outs to your family too, man. Your
Hmm.
grandmother was there for you, your
Yeah,
mom,
definitely, definitely.
grandpa while he was there,
Yeah,
like they were, they were in there, and
yeah.
that was like a real, like, I guess, inspiration to
Uh,
see that. You know what I'm saying?
man,
And
thank you,
to
brother.
see how your son has turned out, you know what I
Yeah,
mean, to be successful in his own right and doing his thing,
yeah.
um, man, you should be very, very proud. I
Man,
know
I
you
am.
are,
Super, man. Thank you,
but
brother. I appreciate it, bro. Yeah,
before the world, man, I just gotta give you a props, man, because to be that young and it just you embrace that
yeah,
responsibility. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying, at that time, which a lot of people, at our age would have ran. You know what I mean, and
yeah,
tried to put the
yeah,
responsibility on someone else. And since I've known you all these years, man, you have always been there for him and all of your kids.
yeah.
But you were
Absolutely.
you were there from jump,
Yeah,
and regardless of what the mom was doing and not doing, like you
yeah,
was like determined to do what you could, even at 18.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, brother.
big
Appreciate that,
ups,
brother.
man.
Appreciate
Big
that.
ups.
Well, we coming to the end now, man, and man, we got our TikTok up and running. If you can go on there, check it out, like, subscribe,
Yeah,
leave a comment, or especially at the description down below, like, comment, and
that's right.
subscribe. We need it for the show to help build the show up. We're working on it. We got a
Yep.
lot of things coming, but we need your help.
Yep, we do. And just to kind of also wrap up on that, men, we can help each other just by doing this,
Yep.
spitting and chatting to one another. I don't care if you got to get in a barber shop or, go hang out somewhere, go eat
Yeah.
somewhere, go see a game, whatever. Just spend some time talking, because it's really helpful. And if I was just to say anything to, the women and the significant others, just do your best not to judge.
Yeah.
Do your best to be supportive because we are still dealing with them little boys
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
We trying to do our best to lead our families and things like that, but we got some things we dealing with,
Absolutely.
and that's the whole goal of this, is to help others, as well. So
Yep.
thanks again for tuning in,
Yep.
and we'll see you next week.
Next week. Next week's a big one. See you there.
See you then.